Willkommen zurück auf dem Uncut-Channel. Heute schauen wir uns ein Video an, was uns, glaube ich, allen sehr viel Spaß machen wird. Das habe ich einfach random auf meiner YouTube-Timeline gesehen. Der Kanal hat auch nur 987 Abonnenten. The entire history of the Warzone Meta. Da hat sich jemand die Mühe gemacht und hat die gesamte Geschichte der Warzone Meta oder Metas ja, quasi einmal recherchiert. Ich bin so ein bisschen durchgeskippt. Er hat wohl wirklich zu allen Gameplays auch, also zu allen Metas auch Gameplay-Szenen. Und ich würde sagen, das gucken wir uns an und schwelgen vielleicht ein bisschen in Erinnerung. Aber erstmal ᴡᴇʀgsmå auf Ashika Island.
Warzone 3 has now been with us for a little over a month, and we already have an established meta. This got me thinking about all the previous metas we've seen in Warzone. We've had some beloved, balanced, and very fun metas, and then there's the vile metas everyone hated. So today I wanted to show.
Ich muss sagen, diese Revolver Akimbo, wenn die nur einen Tag drin sind, übertrieben geil. Nach einem Tag wird direkt nervig, aber einen Tag hat das sehr viel Spaß gemacht in Warzone 3, sage ich euch, wie es ist. Damit Fullteams zu pushen und einmal so eine Bullshit-OP-Meta zu haben, gegen die du auch nichts machen kannst, okay, dann spielt's halt jeder. Und wie gesagt, nach einem Tag wird's scheiße. Aber davor, ich find's einmalig, finde ich's geil. Schreibt mir mal gerne in die Kommentare, wie ihr das seht. Oder, schreibt mir auf gar keinen Fall das in die Kommentare, sondern das viel naheliegendere. Ganz am Ende, nachdem wir alle Metas gesehen haben, schreibt mir eure Lieblingsmeta in die Kommentare. Ich habe schon einen Call, den werde ich aber auch erst am Ende des Videos sagen.
Metas everyone hated. So today I wanted to share with you guys every single Warzone meta from launch to present day. A quick disclaimer, I'm not going to go through every single gun that was like in the meta. I'm more so breaking down eras of the game. That being said, some guns are going to be missed, but I just wanted to talk about the guns that you had to be using if you wanted to compete. Starting with the launch of the game, where for the first couple of months of the game, we had the M4, the HDR and AX50 with thermal, the Grau 556, RPG,
Oh, dieser RPG! Ah, da werde ich direkt wieder sauer. Da haben Leute sich einen weggegammelt mit diesem RPG. War das ekelhaft.
MP5. Pretty sure I've said it a million times on the channel, but when I think of the pandemic, I immediately think of Warzone, but more specifically, this state of the game. The M4 was a very dependable and forgiving gun that anyone could use, and to this day remains a viable choice. Then you had a few different choices for snipers, which we haven't seen in Warzone since. Mine, and just about everyone's favorite, was the Kar 98K. It was super quick, had little bullet drop off, and one shot to the head still. If tactical long range sniping was more your thing, you could use the HDR or AX50 with the thermal sight, which just seemed to be a laser at launch. Also, the body damage was insane, which allowed you to one-shot players who weren't even fully plated without a headshot.
Das war so wild, ne? Diese HDR und vor allem das Thermalvisier war am Anfang noch stärker, das wurde noch genervt. Du hast across the map die Gegner weiß leuchten sehen, durch irgendwelche Bäume durch. Alles war wirklich dunkel, außer Gegner, die haben wirklich geleuchtet. Das haben sie dann irgendwann noch geändert, aber das war so krass.
Was the Grau. I think everyone can agree that this was everyone's favorite meta AR. Throwing on the Archangel barrel, you have this beautiful iron sight that allowed you to forego any optic, enabling you to kit this out to be an absolute
was hat das für ein Gegner?
Not to mention, it's still pretty damn good today. I've seen people make videos about using this in Warzone Pacific.
Wie alt ist das Video? Vor 8 Tagen. It's still pretty good. Digga, es gibt Warzone 1 nicht mehr. Kann das dem jemand sagen? Das ist over. Caldera gibt's nicht mehr, Warzone 1 gibt's nicht mehr. Die grauen Warzone gibt's nicht mehr. Er weiß es nicht.
And still dominating. There's even a couple of weirdos who would run a double Grau class where they would have the one long range kitted out, but for your other one you turn into a nutty SMG that some.
Das habe ich, um ehrlich zu sein, nie verstanden, weil die Grau TTK war mittelmäßig und SMGs haben viel schneller getötet. Diese Close Range Grau war nie gut. Die war nie besser als irgendwelche SMGs.
However, if you weren't an absolute psychopath, you would pair this with the MP5, which would also be a viable option for the rest of this game's life cycle. But if you're a no-good piece of shit like me, you paired this with an RPG that made for a great close-range substitute because the one-shot radius on this thing was broken. Not to mention the vehicle destruction was awesome. A quick honorable mention goes out to the snake shots. Although they were very broken and possibly the most broken version of a shotgun Warzone has ever seen, they weren't near as viable because this is before Rebirth Island or Resurgence in general had been released, and Verdansk being a long-range map, it wasn't near as common that you were super close like that in this state of the game. A couple of nerfs and patches later, and that brings you to the meta just before the Cold War integration, where we saw guns such as the Origin 12 shotgun,
widerlich. Ich muss sagen, die R90 Feuershotgun fand ich weniger schlimm als die Origin, weil mit der R90 musst du es ja zumindest nach 2 Schüssen repetieren. Das heißt, du musstest ein bisschen deine Shots timen. Mit der Origin hast du ja wirklich einfach nur bum, 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 bum. Wie? Bum, bum, bum. Ja, ist ja auch egal.
The R9 shotgun, the AS Val, the M13, the Kilo 141, and most notably, the Bruin LMG.
Ja,
not much to say about the shotguns other than they were pretty broken with the Dragon's Breath rounds and honestly just not fun to play against. The AS Val had this bug with this bullet penetration that allowed you to shoot through the entire map, and that is not an exaggeration.
Stimmt, das war so wild.
But even after they fixed the bullet penetration, it was still a really good gun. Honestly, was perfect to run with a sniper.
Die AS-Wahl hat auch so schnell getötet. Die AS-Wahl habe ich komplett vergessen. Die hat nicht mehr existiert in meinem Gehirn.
Kilo and the M13 together because they acted very similar to me. They were both very accurate, but didn't deal the most damage, so you really had to hit your shots. A nice feature about the Kilo is that if you were an absolute sick bastard, you could throw on the monkey nuts on this John and treat it pretty much just like an LMG. But throughout all this chaos during the state of the game, the absolute most broken gun at the time was the Bruin. This was another one of those can't beat him, join him situations, since this gun was leaps and bounds ahead of everything else at the time. Nerfs eventually made this thing
Wieso haben diese ganzen amerikanischen Creator eigentlich immer diese Ultra-Headlich-Cams? Guck mal, man sieht einfach nur seine Stirn und seine Augen. Nicht mal seine Nase sieht man ganz von Nick Merckx.
Usable, which I think everyone was happy with. Now we have the Cold War integration era, which is also about the same time when Rebirth Island got introduced, which not only changed how the game was played, but obviously added way too many weapons into the mix. However, right after Cold War came out, the dominant ones were the FFAR, the Akimbo Diamatis, the MAC-10, and most notably, the DMR. Aside from the FFAR, this may have been my least favorite state of the game. For starters, making all the Cold War guns meta is a shameless attempt to get people to buy the game, but aside from that, the DMR MAC-10 combo was ridiculous. The DMR could shoot as fast as you could finger blast the trigger, and the MAC-10 had no recoil, a lot of damage, and a massive magazine. Absolutely no reason to not use this SMG. However, if the MAC-10 didn't do it for you, you still had the Akimbo Diamatis, which were a 3-round burst killing machine. Insane accuracy, a decent mag size, and crazy damage made this thing very, very unfun to play against. However, there was a little glimpse of light during this dark meta with the FFAR. This FAMAS-like AR was a laser that was also really good at close range and was a perfect gun to run with a sniper. Also have a universally loved iron sight. This was another fan.
Am allergeilsten bei der FFAR war einfach die Tatsache, dass du mit der so ein krasses Strafe Speed hattest. Du warst so wie auf Schlittschuhen unterwegs und das vermisse ich.
Now that Cold War had been out for a couple months, a new update to Modern Warfare 2019 would bring in a brand new gun known as the AMAX. This dominated this state of the game, but there were still other viable options such as the FARA. We even had a short period of time where we saw a burst meta with the Cold War M16 and the AUG. And to round things off, another broken pistol, which you could pretty much use as an SMG because of its insane
die fand ich schrecklich, die Psychoff. Fand ich nicht geil. Aber die AMAX, da muss ich sagen, da bin ich traurig, dass ich diese Zeit AMAX, M16, FFAR, alles in diesem Kosmos, in dieser Zeit, dass ich da nicht so gut war dass ich da noch echt einfach nicht so gut war und dass ich da noch nicht so einen geilen PC hatte, wo mein Gaming-Setup einfach perfekt war und ich mir keine Gedanken machen musste. Da habe ich noch auf Single-PC-Setup und sowas und dabei aufgenommen und gestreamt. Das hat natürlich alles Input-Delay und sowas gebracht. Und das vermisse ich so krass und beziehungsweise ich bin ein bisschen traurig, dass ich es nicht in einem richtig geilen Gaming-Setup testen und spielen konnte und in einem Zustand, wo ich halt auch einfach ein besserer Spieler war.
Meta, since the AMAX was very good, but actually required some recoil control by the player, which made it a high-risk, high-reward gun. And although the burst meta was broken and extremely annoying, it didn't last long since it got hit with nerfs pretty fast.
Ja.
Now we're at the time for
Da muss ich sagen, wobei,
about late spring of 2021 to the release of Vanguard, and here's where things get out of control with just an absolute hodgepodge of guns in that range. We have the MG82, Swiss K3, OTS9,
OTS war so geil, Bullfrog,
XM4, Krieg 6, Cold War AK-47 and Cold War MP5. Honestly, I would say there's only a
Cold War AK war nie Meta.
Few guns worth breaking down
also
here.
Cold War
First
AK.
being the MG82, which had absolutely no recoil and a high capacity for its magazine. This made it a lot of fun to use and made big team wipes at range easier than ever. Then you had the Swiss K3, which was just as good, if not better, than the Kar 98 and made for a great substitute. It was honestly a lot of fun having two really good bolt-action rifles to choose from at the time. Then there was the XM4, which I'm pretty sure remained
ja, ich vermisse dieses schnelle Snipen.
It was pretty much the M4 for Modern Warfare 2019, but just the Cold War version. Not much to say about
XM4 habe ich nie so gemocht.
The Swiss K being introduced was the most important thing going on here. Now we have the Vanguard merge, which completely changed the entire game. The Vanguard guns, obviously we know, supported 10 attachments and pretty much all of them were broken. I know a lot of people love this state of the game, but me personally, I could not stand it. The meta-defining guns...
Ich muss dazu sagen, die Vanguard SMGs fand ich ganz geil. Dass die Feuermunition überhaupt auf die Waffen montierbar war, fand ich absolut schrecklich. Fand ich auch widerlich, habe ich auch nie gespielt tatsächlich. MP40 war aber geil, aber die Feuermunition, die Brandmunition widerlich, ekelhaft. Die ganzen ARs und alles Long Range, was Vanguard mit sich gebracht hat, fand ich alles richtig scheiße. MP40 und Owen, aber auch die, wie hießen sie denn am Ende? Vielleicht kommt das ja jetzt noch. Auf jeden Fall, Vanguard SMGs haben sich gut gespielt, der Rest scheiße.
Time were the MP40, the Owen Gun, the Bren LMG, the Cooper Carbine,
war die Bren eine Scheißwaffe. Wellgun war aber geil.
The STG-44 and the PPSH. I kid you not, every gun on this list has 0 recoil. Like I said, I personally started to take a backseat around this game because I just hated the Vanguard meta. Even though I owned the game, I had absolutely no desire to play it to level up the guns. The MP40, Owen Gun, PPSH, and Wellgun were some of the most broken SMGs we've ever seen.
Owen war so geil. Und MP40 auch. Das Visier von der MP40 so geil.
Then you have the Cooper, STG, and Bren, which again dominated every other gun from
Cooper fand ich langweilig.
2019. If you weren't using any of the guns listed above during this time, you simply had no chance. I know a lot of sweaty Resurgence players love this state of the game, but I simply could not get into it. Now we'll take like spring of 2022 all the way up into the launch of Modern Warfare 2, which is honestly the same story as the last meta. Saw another Vanguard circle jerk of guns that included the Type 100,
das war eine langweilige
the
Zeit.
NC41, the Marco 5,
Marco und
Blixen
Marco und Blixen fand ich geil. Das war so die Fortune's Keep Zeit.
Like I said, these were all meta and overpowered, but definitely not near as toxic as the meta before this. Somewhere in this window, Fortune's Keep was released, which I think Infinity Ward wanted to go away from SMGs for a little bit and enable them more like mid to long range guns to have some time in the spotlight. But around this time, like I said, this is about when I stopped playing the game or really caring, so I don't really have much to say about it, other than this is when COD really started to go downhill. Which brings me to the launch of...
Oh, und jetzt kommen wir zu einer Zeit, wo ich, glaube ich, bei allem, was ich gleich sehe, kotzen will. Also, es ist wirklich, ich muss das auch nochmal betonen, Verdansk, unfassbar geile Zeit. Verdansk 84, unfassbar geile Zeit. Auch trotz den ganzen Bugs. Und eigentlich war es Quality of Life technisch ja wirklich nicht gut. Vieles hat nicht funktioniert. Alles Mögliche gab Probleme. Aber das Spiel, der Core, war so geil. Es hat so viel Flair, so viel Atmosphäre gab es. Und es war so nice, hat einfach Spaß gemacht. Ja, Caldera war kacke und sowas, und die Waffen waren, es wurde alles so ein bisschen aber dann gab es zumindest Rebirth und Fortune's Keep und es gab trotzdem noch Dinge, die sehr viel Spaß gemacht haben an dem Spiel. Warzone 2 kommt raus und dieses langsame, du hast nur 2 Platten, man sieht's da unten, wenn du keine Dreierweste gefunden hast, du hast nur 2 Platten, du kannst dir beim Platten geben, kannst du nicht sprinten, du kannst das Nachladen nicht abbrechen, du bist in 2 Millisekunden tot von einer Fennec mit einer Millionenfeuerrate oder von einer RPK ohne Rückstoß, du hast kein Movement, alles ist langsam, nach dem Springen kannst du kaum ins Visier gehen, weil alles so slow ist. Widerlich. 0 von 10 Warzone. 0 von 10, wirklich.
Warzone 2 in Fall of 2022.
Die Waffen haben alle so einen komischen visuellen Rückstoß. Alles wackelt einfach nur rum. Das Rückstoßmuster ist gar nicht so schwer zu kontrollieren, sondern einfach nur, du fängst an zu schießen, dein Bildschirm.
Warzone 2 honestly only revolved around a couple of guns at a time. It never was like a super wide range. Like at launch we had the RPK, the Fennec, the TAC-V and the TAC-56. There were seriously like no other
TAC-V war das einzige, was halbwegs Spaß gemacht hat.
The RPK and Fennec were dominating everything and were very easy to use.
Und auch
the
dieses
TAC-V I would argue was much better, but just required a little more precision to use. TAC-56 was also very user-friendly, and I think everyone just loves the iron sights on this. Of all the guns early this meta though, the Fennec was definitely the most broken. If you had any gun but the Fennec in a close range situation, you always died. Fast forward a couple months where we had Resurgence introduced to Warzone 2, where once again we had a very narrow window of good guns to choose. We had the RAL LMG, the Seiken LMG, the Hemlock AR, Vaznev SMG, and the Lockman sub. You can say what you want about Warzone 2, but I honestly love just about every meta this game had to offer. The RAL was a textbook definition of this gun takes skill to use. You control the recoil and you're going to do well, but most players could not do that because of how much recoil it had. Then you had the Hemlock, which was a very good AR, but
ISO hat so einen geilen Sound gehabt, muss man sagen.
To balance it out. Then the Lockman sub and Vaznev were both very fun to use, but even after nerfs still remained viable throughout Warzone 2's entirety. Now I'm just gonna cover the rest of the game's life cycle, which to me,
auch ganz
honestly,
cool.
didn't really see
Man muss dazu sagen, die Waffen wären eigentlich echt nice gewesen, wenn das Base-Gameplay geil gewesen wäre. Also wenn wir Also stellt euch mal diese Waffen vor, so zu Verdansk-Zeiten. Und dann auch ohne diesen komischen visuellen Rückstoß und so. Und ohne diesen ganzen Scheiß, der einfach in Warzone 2 dazugekommen wäre. Die Waffen an sich wären gar nicht blöd gewesen.
Crazy in the meta besides like 2 really standout guns to me. Starting off with the Cronin Squall, yet another one of my favorite metas because it was a high recoil damage gun that I think rewarded good players. You paired that with the ISO SMG and you were unstoppable. After a nerf to that, we saw the Lockman 5.56, which people were calling the Drought 2.0 because of its zero recoil build. Once that was nerfed, we kind of entered this weird state of the game where you could really use anything, but I would say most people were using the Cast-Off 7.62, which was aka the AK-47. I really couldn't tell you exactly what the meta was from summer 22 all the way up until Warzone 3.
Ja, gab's da immer was anderes.
So now that brings us to modern day where we're playing Warzone 3 on Urzikstan. And honestly, there's a lot of guns in the meta right now as we approach the Season 1 Reloaded update, which I'm sure is about to change. We're probably going to get some crazy nerfs here first, but these are the guns that we have right now. The MTZ Interceptor, Polymont LMG, BAS-B Battle Rifle, WSP Swarm, WSP-9, Striker, Ram 7, and the MTZ 7.62. With a lot to choose from right now, I think most would agree that the Interceptor, Polymont, and Swarm are at the forefront. The Interceptor has already seen a nerf, but it's still...
Die MTZ Interceptor vor dem Nerf war so geisteskrank.
Instead it's a 3-tap, which is still ridiculous.
Jetzt braucht sie 4 Bullets, die ist nicht mehr so
gut.
gut.
The Polymont has an insane mobility and accuracy with the conversion kit. However, the other two SMGs offer a little bit more options at mid-range, which I think are better with the Interceptor. And you also have the BAS-B, which has also seen a nerf already, but this thing is also still ridiculous.
Maybe
not at long range, but at mid to close, this also makes a great pair for the Interceptor or the Cat AMR, which I would also go ahead and throw in the meta since it's the only sniper that will guarantee one shot to the head, even without explosive ammo. Just a few honorable mentions I'd like to go over with is the snake shots, which I kid you not, were only in the game for like 48 hours. Honestly, really crazy how fast Infinity Ward got these out of the game.
Raven Software, nicht Infinity Ward. Großes Tutu. Nicht Infinity Ward, Raven.
And similarly, the
Infinity Ward macht nichts Gutes. Hat zumindest in letzter Zeit nichts Gutes gemacht.
Liquid 300 somehow through all the patches got reverted to the broken Warzone 2 state where the dual trigger has insane range and one taps also. But that is the entire Warzone meta history in one video.
Digga, wie schlecht dieser Werfer ist.
I didn't cover everything, but I really just wanted to highlight those meta-defining guns that were dominating the game at whatever time period it was. But let me know what your favorite meta was down below, or your least favorite. I know I'll probably put out a video of like my personal favorite and with the ones I hated the most as well. But if you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you for watching.
Es ist wirklich ein ziemlich gutes Video. Der hat sehr wenig Abonnenten, der Mann. Kann man mal ein Like da lassen. Und ich verrate euch jetzt hier meine absolute Lieblingsmeta of all time. M16 und FFAR were just crazy. Das war meine absolute Lieblingszeit in Warzone. Zumindest meine Lieblingsmeta. Das hat so viel Spaß gemacht. Die M16 kontrollieren im Burst, einfach nach unten drücken und die 3 Bullets landen aufeinander, wenn du das perfekt getimed hast und dann noch Leuten, wow, hat das Spaß gemacht. Weil es halt auch einfach Skill gebraucht hat, ne? Deshalb immer Waffen, die irgendwie ein bisschen schwerer zu spielen waren, aber wenn du sie kontrollieren konntest, dann konntest du damit richtig krasse Sachen machen. Das fand ich immer am geilsten. Ja, schreibt mir, wie gesagt, eure Lieblingsmeta mal in die Kommentare. Sehr cooles Video, sehr nice, dass er sich die Mühe gemacht hat, auch die ganzen Gameplay-Szenen so zusammen zu cutten und sowas und einfach alles zusammenzufassen. Wirklich sehr cooles Video. Hat sehr viel Spaß gemacht, mir das alles anzuschauen. Die ganzen Metas einfach mal wieder zu sehen und auch einfach mich daran zu erinnern, weil vieles hat man ja auch einfach wieder vergessen, logischerweise. Ja, deshalb lasst auf jeden Fall gerne ein Like da. Schaut bei dem Video vorbei, lasst da auch ein Like da. Wie gesagt, vergesst den Kommentar nicht und dann sehen wir uns im nächsten Video oder im nächsten Livestream. Haut da rein. Ciao, ciao.